November 15th, 1942. The waters of Iron Bottom Sound are as black as ink, the silence broken only by the churn of propellers and the restless crash of waves against steel hulls. In the heart of that darkness, the USS Washington glides forward, unseen, unheard, yet fully awake. Her crew knows what hangs in the balance: Henderson Field, the lifeline of Guadalcanal, and with it, the survival of American forces in the Pacific. The Japanese are coming with battleships, cruisers, and destroyers, fully confident that their long-trained doctrine of night fighting will deliver victory. But what they don't know is that tonight, the very rules of naval warfare are about to be rewritten. Think about it. An enemy battleship charging through the night, relying on human eyes, while your own ship has invisible electronic eyes piercing the dark. It's the 1940s, and yet it feels like something ripped out of modern science fiction. Now imagine yourself on board. You're a young sailor, maybe 19 years old, just a kid from Kansas or New Jersey, standing at your station inside a steel fortress bristling with 9 16-inch guns. You can't see the enemy, but your radar operator calmly reads out the range, 20,000 yards, closing fast. Fear creeps in, because you know one wrong move, one lucky shell, and your ship could vanish beneath the waves. Yet there's also electricity in the air, excitement. Tonight, you're not just defending a patch of ocean, you're fighting for the future of the Pacific War. Admiral Nobutake Kondo's force believed they were unstoppable. After all, the Kirishima was no stranger to battle. This was the same ship that had helped hammer Pearl Harbor. She carried 8 14-inch guns, manned by crews trained to perfection in the art of night gunnery. Japanese naval doctrine was built on the idea that their rangefinders, their optics, their discipline made them masters of night battle. But doctrine has a funny way of crumbling when reality changes the rules. Washington's radar-directed fire control meant she could not only see in the dark, she could track and shoot while maneuvering at high speed. The Japanese thought such a thing was impossible, like trying to fight with blindfolds on against a man who can see through walls. And when the first salvo of 16-inch shells roared from Washington's guns, history itself seemed to pause. Can you picture it? 42 shells, each weighing as much as a small car, streaking invisibly through the darkness. The Kirishima never even spotted her attacker. Within minutes, fire and chaos consumed her decks, her mighty guns silenced. For the Japanese sailors, it must have felt like being struck by lightning from a storm they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't fight back against. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn, because the destruction of the Kirishima was more than the loss of a ship. It was the loss of an entire way of war. Generations of training, strategy, and doctrine, all undone in a single night by the cold, invisible sweep of radar. And it wasn't just about one battle. It was about fear creeping into the hearts of Japanese commanders who realized that America, the enemy they thought technologically inferior, was now leaping ahead at breakneck speed. The question is, how did this happen so fast? How did a navy that seemed broken at Pearl Harbor transform into one that could crush Japanese doctrine just 11 months later? We're going to dive into that, but before we do, pause for a second and think about this. If you were in Kondo's shoes that night, would you have trusted your doctrine, your training, your pride, or would you have suspected that the battlefield had already changed forever? Because this story isn't just about ships and guns. It's about the brutal moment when one nation's confidence shatters in the face of unexpected innovation. And trust me, you don't want to miss how the Americans pulled it off.
So how did the United States Navy pull off what seemed impossible? Going from the ashes of Pearl Harbor to unleashing technological thunder at Guadalcanal in less than a year. The answer lies not only in machines, but in people, choices, and a willingness to adapt under fire. While Japan's admirals clung to decades-old doctrine, America embraced radical innovation. Radar was no longer a laboratory toy. It became the invisible edge that could mean the difference between survival and annihilation. The USS Washington was among the first battleships to harness this leap, armed with the Mark 8 fire control radar, a system so precise that it could track a ship hidden in total darkness, even while maneuvering at high speed. For the sailors of the Washington, it meant they could fight in a dimension the Japanese simply couldn't comprehend. And here's the kicker. Many Japanese officers refused to believe that radar was real. They thought the Americans were lying, exaggerating, or simply lucky. Imagine walking into a boxing ring blindfolded, confident in your training, only to discover your opponent sees every move you make. That's what Kirishima faced. But technology alone doesn't win wars. People do. And aboard the Washington was Admiral Willis Lee, a man nicknamed Ching by his crew, whose calm intelligence was matched only by his mastery of gunnery. Lee wasn't a flashy commander, he was deliberate, analytical, and unshakable under pressure. When the battle erupted, he didn't panic or fall back on outdated doctrine. He trusted his radar, trusted his men, and unleashed devastating volleys at exactly the right moment. In a way, this was America's answer to the shock of Pearl Harbor, a generation of leaders who refused to be trapped by the past. And let's not forget the human cost. Picture the Japanese sailors aboard the Kirishima, trained since boyhood to believe in the invincibility of their fleet. They had drilled for years, mastered optics, practiced the art of night gunnery until it was second nature. Yet on that November night, all of it crumbled. Fire tore through the decks, ammunition exploded, men were thrown into the sea, clutching at wreckage, staring at the flames of their battleship as it rolled and sank beneath the waves. Fear, shock, disbelief. It wasn't just the end of a ship. It was the end of a way of thinking. And here's the chilling truth. Wars are often lost not when your weapons fail, but when your faith in them collapses. Now, humor me for a second. What do you think those sailors thought as the Washington shells came crashing down? Did they curse their luck? Did they pray to the gods of the sea? Or maybe they asked the same questions soldiers always ask in the heat of defeat. How did this happen? That's the reset moment, the question that forces us, even today, to reflect on the razor-thin line between dominance and disaster. The Battle of Guadalcanal didn't just secure an island, it secured momentum. After Kirishima's destruction, Japanese admirals began to fear night battles, the very kind they had once counted on to win the Pacific. The psychological shift was massive. The Americans had not only bloodied the Imperial Navy, they had stolen its confidence. From that night forward, Japan was no longer the hunter in the Pacific. They were the hunted. And here's where urgency comes in, because this battle still holds lessons for today. Innovation changes everything. The side that clings to tradition, to doctrine, to pride, risks being outmaneuvered by an enemy willing to leap forward. In 1942, radar was the leap. In 2025, it might be artificial intelligence, drones, or weapons we can't even imagine yet. That's why this story isn't just history, it's a warning. So as you let the roar of those 16-inch guns echo in your imagination, remember this: the night Washington shattered Kirishima wasn't just a battle, it was a turning point in the war, a moment when America proved it could not only fight back, but leap ahead. And if you think this was dramatic, wait until you hear about the next chapter, when radar, air power, and industrial might combined to crush Japan's navy once and for all at battles like the Philippine Sea.